Hello everybody, we're working on Chapter 5 again tonight. Today is Wednesday, October 25th, I believe. Yep, 25th, 2017. Last time when we were in class, we managed to finish up the section on finding things using some of the search capabilities that are built into Active Record. And I needed to use that as a stopping point just simply so that the variables that we had set in memory last week, which at least on my machine now will not have persisted because I have rebooted many times since then, we can start fresh, because at this point on page 75 you can see that we're going to be pulling the first article in. You guys should be kind of getting comfortable with the syntax now, and then storing it in that generic variable called article. So we're going to start with that step. So we're going to start with these commands. Now the thing that we want to make sure in terms of being all geared up, if you are copy pasting from your PDF, obviously you want to have that up and running somewhere. I would recommend that you launch a command prompt window. Just go down to your start menu, type CMD. You guys should be getting comfortable with this now, and press enter. So in your prompt, I would also recommend that you have a file folder window open. You might want to open up your text editor. You might want to also open up your SQLite browser. And I'm just trying to get you guys so that all your tools are up and running, so you're not fumbling later on to do that. And you're going to see that this is kind of a pattern for us in terms of how this works. Now, since I brought up the SQLite browser, I'm going to go ahead and attach the database right away. So I'm going to click on Open Database here. And then I'm going to navigate to the location of my project, which is in the root of the C drive. And this is the version that I was working on. I probably shouldn't just go ahead and attach to it right now. What should I do first? Anybody have a thought of what I should do before I start messing with this project?
We should make another version.
You are exactly correct, Erin. I am going to version my work. So what that means, folks, is I'm going to go into the File Explorer here. I'm going to navigate into my project folder and find the blog that I was working on last time, which is the one just called blog. That's the one I actively work on. But I know that I've completed Chapter 5 up through midway through page 75, and everything was working just fine. So I'm just going to do a right-click copy, and then a right-click paste, and then I'm going to rename that, and I'm going to call it Chapter 5 up through page 75 complete. So now if I screw up, I can go right back to where I was and not have to stress. If you use a service like GitHub or Bitbucket, which I encourage you guys to do, you can version your work through those programs. And if you use a better IDE, you can also set the versioning so that it happens automatically. Real programmers that work professionally, and all it takes is getting burned once on a project for you to understand the importance of versioning your work. Doing it manually like this is fine. There's nothing wrong with doing it manually. Some people will zip it. Some people will make copies. Given the fact that this exists only on a physical hard drive on this machine, it'd probably be smart of me to also send versions of this up to my Google Drive or my Dropbox or something to have it, because what if somebody steals my laptop? Then all my work for the semester is gone, right? So that's something that you should consider. Another safety net that we have is when you guys are submitting your homework, and I know that in many cases I have not been asking you for the zip versions of your projects, right? You might want to consider when you're turning in your homework that you zip up your work and include it in the project submission, very simply because if you do have some sort of an issue like that, it gives you another fail-safe, because I'll have a version of it that's stored on the Blackboard servers, and that way you don't have to freak out about losing your work. So do that at the very least. Okay, so now we have a version, and now I can go back to what I was about to do. which is to open that database. I'm going to navigate to the root of my C drive, find my projects folder, find my blog folder, go to the database folder, and we're in development mode, so we're choosing development and open. And then once we do that, we get the schema for the entire database, but we want to see what's inside, right? So we're going to click on Browse Data, and then we're going to come up here and select the table we want to look at. And really the only table we've really been working with that's been generated by us is the articles table. And here it is, and there's the information. So right now it looks like I have 5 different items in the database. You may or may not have the same. It depends on how precisely you were following along with my examples, or how many things that maybe you tried just on your own. Just remember that one nice thing about using this tool is that you can come in and actually tweak some of the entries, delete them, add others. But whatever changes you do make, you have to remember that if you choose New Record or Delete Record, that you have to come up here and hit this Write Changes button when you're done. Otherwise, it will not write to the database. It's kind of temporary. So that's actually different than other database products. Like if you're working in like MySQL Workbench, or if you were working in SQL Server or Access even, and you were working directly with a table, and you just simply move from one row to another, it automatically writes to the database. This product does not work that way. This allows you to make a whole bunch of changes and not commit those changes until you hit write. And then the other nice thing that it does is it also has basically an undo button, which allows you to revert those changes and go back to the previous version. So those are actually 2 useful little things here. So that's why I really like this tool for this class, because it just gives us that peace of mind. I would, no, it doesn't have a Command C. No, I didn't code that one. They should have put a Control Z in there, but you often don't get that with database products. If you look really carefully, very simply because databases write to the disk on the fly. They don't wait always for a save command. All right, so let's assume that everybody's got that going, and if you don't, holler, and I'll pause or something. Right now I'm at my prompt, folks, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop down to the root, so I'm going to do cd space /. And I always, okay, so I have this habit. I work with Linux once in a while. So with Linux, when you type a cd command, you always have to put a space after it. So I've gotten in the habit of always doing that. But in Windows, you can actually do cd /, and it still works. All right. Then I'm going to do cd projects, and then cd blog. And that's what I've been calling mine, whatever the working version is for your blog. Mine's just called blog. That's what it's going to be. All right. Now, if you remember, we were working from a different type of prompt. What was the command I needed to type to bring up the other prompt? Does anybody? Rails console. Very good. I'm going to type Rails console. And we'll just give it a moment. All right, so now we have our interactive Ruby prompt, and we are all set to start typing commands. I am going to split screen myself here with the book. And actually, I think I'm going to change this. I'm going to move this to this side. And then I'm going to hide the sidebar here. I'll just do a little bit of adjustment. If you guys have any problems reading the screen at all, just holler, and I'll adjust sizes. All right, so we are going to begin now by very simply copying the commands that we're seeing up here on the screen. All right, so let's go ahead and just type article. All right. So you can see that we did load it up. Now you notice that this is a little different from what we're seeing in the book. Can anybody explain to me why? Why am I seeing all these SQL statements? We took them out for privacy?
No, he took them out. He stopped including them in the text.
Yeah, he did. That's absolutely correct. So that shows to me that you're actually reading the book. It's a little bit of a test, you know. Thankfully, it's not a quiz. But basically, most of the commands that you type are gonna spit something back to you. So he's not going to do it in every case. He's only going to do it in certain cases. In this case, he's only going to do it after the last line. But what I just functionally did is I ran a very simple command that leverages Active Record. Active Record runs the SQL command for us, goes to the database, pulls back the first article, and stores it in article. Now I'm going to be able to actually go through and type the commands as indicated, where we are going to start changing things. So before I actually change it, I'm going to actually go back here, and the first article is Rails conf, right? The body of it says whatever it says. But what is it he wants us to do? Did we bring back the right article? We sure did, right? He wants us to change that title. So article.title will now become Rails 4 is great, except guess what? We're using Rails 5. How about that? Yes, I'm striking my own path here, folks. I'm being brave. Coming up with my very own title. This is America, after all. Right? And next thing we're going to do is we're going to change the published at date, and we're going to put time.now. So it's going to timestamp it with the current time, and it shows you what it is. Yes, it is 6:08 already, believe it or not. And now that we've made those two changes, we are going to say article.save, which then runs another SQL command and writes it back to the database.
Notice how it says update there?
Right, and notice what the section is for the book, because we're not creating a new record, we're not deleting a record, we're not inserting a record, we're updating one that already exists. So we're taking something that's already there. Active Record intelligently recognizes that and runs the right SQL command to make it happen. You want to go back to the SQLite browser and verify that the change happened? You sure can. In fact, let's just do that. It's always kind of fun to do that, I think. So I'm just going to hit the refresh key, and you can see that it did actually change. And it changed the published at date. So it has year, month, day, and then the actual timestamp. Right down to the microsecond, it looks like. All right. Now, interestingly, there's some follow-up commands here he wants us to type. So I'm going to type article equals article.first. So wait, we're reloading that one? Yeah, we're reloading that same article. Now remember, the act of doing this is pulling it back into memory, because we just committed it back to the disk, right? We just saved it. So now we're pulling it back in to do some additional work. So we'll do that. So it pulls it back in. Notice the title has changed. That's another verification. So we went to SQLite to verify, but we can also do it from the prompt. And then we're going to run this other command that allows us to kind of do the same thing that we just did. And this is the fun part of this, is they have all these different methods that people have created. And what this one does, it says update attributes, and then notice the format for it. We're going to say #title, and then equals bracket, and we're going to change the title again. So I'm going to change it to something else. Comma separated. We're also going to change the published at date. It seems like my keyboard's responding here, so I'm being a little patient. I pressed backspace a couple of times and it didn't seem to work, which has me a little concerned. Is my machine locked up? Sometimes my school machine acts up a little bit. So what I'm doing right now is I'm actually being patient because I'm afraid that if I keep pressing backspace, it's just going to erase all those commands I just typed. So I'm going to press it again. Oh, there it is. Somehow that cursor ended up on the other line. Don't ask me how. Published at, and then notice 1.day.ago. That works. Believe it or not, that works. Isn't that weird? All right, and it didn't like it. What did I do wrong? So it had unexpected. Who can spot my error? So I did article dot update underscore attributes. That looks fine. Title. Rails 5 is cool. That looks okay. Published at 1 day ago. And so let's see what the error message says. It says unexpected. Expecting end of input where right before 1 day ago. Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm not really sure what the problem is, frankly. But I don't think it read that whole command is my concern.
Yeah.
So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just copy and paste this whole command right in. So you guys see what I just did?
Yeah.
And that worked.
Yeah. I don't think you read the entire thing because
Yeah, something, when I was doing it before and it wasn't like backspacing for me, something got broken there, clearly. Now, the whole difference between this approach, and this is similar to some of the stuff that we've been seeing, is that you can go and on an individual level change each attribute within a record, or you can do it in one fell swoop where it changes it and updates the database all at once. And for a lot of reasons, programmatically, you might prefer this secondary approach. It's just a matter of syntax and knowing that syntax. All right, next topic that we have is actually doing deletions. So let's go ahead and follow suit with the next series of commands. So we're going to do article equals article dot last, and of course that is going to pull up the last article, and then we're just going to type article dot destroy. Right? And I love that because it sounds a little bit more final than delete. We're not just deleting it, we're destroying it. All right, and just press enter. And then you can see it does run the SQL delete command. And hopefully now if I go back to my SQLite browser, hit that little refresh, that last entry will just disappear. I'll get both those screens back up. All right, now if you read the next couple of little blurbs that the author puts in here, he tries to explain to you what happens. And I do want to be really clear that between the versions of Ruby and Rails, that the output that we get from running some of the commands changes slightly. But what I am noticing, like for example, he says if you're interested, the SQL that Active Record generates, you know, it shows you delete from articles where articles ID equals question mark, and then notice how it says ID comment 5. It's not the same output, right? So it looks like in the previous versions it would more cleanly build that, but really what's happening here is it's dynamically, they've changed the language so it dynamically picks up the ID of the record that we're deleting and just adds it in a different way, but really is doing the same thing. That's kind of the point there. All right, now he's going to actually do some additional little commands here. Since we still have that object loaded into memory, one might think that we could start changing some of the other attributes. Like, for example, he's trying to force into it a location for the article, and what he wants put in there is a location of Toronto. Now, this is interesting because what's happening now is it's trying to write. But what is it trying to write to? Now think about this. We loaded into memory the last article, then we destroyed it. Article.location, even though the object is in memory, it's not going to work anymore because we just destroyed that darn thing, right? So there's no way that we can now write it back to the database, and it's recognizing that fact, and that's why it's throwing the error that it's throwing. It's calling it a frozen hash, and I guess that's basically not good. Okay, notice what it says here. It appears that the deleted article is now frozen. The object remains, but it's read-only, so you can't modify it. So it does still exist in memory, right? So it says, given this fact, if you're going to delete the record, you don't really need to create an explicit article object. After all, you can destroy the article in a one-line operation. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, you don't actually have to destroy it. If you want to type that command, you can. If you don't want to, I'm going to actually go ahead and do it. So, just to demonstrate it. So, instead of grabbing that article, throwing it into a variable, and then destroying it, I mean, you want to destroy it, right? Why mess around? Just get right to it. This directly jumps in there and does the destruction. Another thing that you can do is you can take that and you can actually type article destroy and then throw in the ID number of the article if you happen to know it. And I'm going to ask you guys a question. I'm going to go back to SQLite browser really quick. I'm going to do a refresh because I just destroyed another article. And notice I have articles with IDs of 1, 2, and 3. If I run article.destroy1, will that work? It will work because that ID number is valid. So here we go. Boom. Did it actually delete? Oops. Sure did. What if you want to destroy a whole bunch of things? Well, that's where you start to change your syntax. I'm not going to actually go ahead and do this, I think, because I think I'm going to be clearing out my whole database, right? So I'm not going to actually type these commands, but if you want to, please feel free. But that's the way that you do it. You just put it in parentheses, square brackets, and then a comma-separated list with the ID numbers. All right. Now, there's a different way to do this, right? Because we don't usually think of, like, when we learned our SQL commands, we didn't learn a destroy command, we learned a delete command. And what they're next telling you, I mean, the preference in this language is to use the destroy, but there is also a delete. Now, what's interesting about this, it says every active record class has methods called delete and delete all, and it differs from destroy in that they don't instantiate or perform callbacks on the object they're deleting. They remove the row immediately from the database, so there's no secondary interaction. It skips it and it just goes directly to the database. That's what it's telling you. Now, if I happen to type the command that you see there, and I'm gonna type it, and I think it probably might not work because I'm not looking at the database right now, but I'm basically gonna article delete line number 4. Do I have a line number 4 in there? I don't. So will it delete? What do you suppose the 0 means? 0 means false. That's what the 0 means. And when I talk about the 0, I'm talking about this 0 right here. And it's the same one that you're seeing in the book. So when he did it, he ran it and he got a true because he did have an article 4. Now if I ran that same command, I come back over to the prompt and I up arrow and I change that to 3. I know there's a 3 in there. I get a 1 as a response, meaning it just worked. And you can see this is a little bit more of a direct brute force approach to deleting the database content. That's really the point. If you want to try the next command, feel free. And just simply the syntax, you do 5, 6. So that means he's deleting more than 1. Of course, the result for this one will be what? 0. But if I had a bunch of them and I wanted to delete in one fell swoop, it is possible to do it. There's lots of variations to these methods, and really the thing that's important for you to understand is how to be able to get to the documentation to discover what those commands are. You're learning some of the basic ones. And in many cases, when you're doing development work, the basic ones are really all you need. I mean, you don't really need to go much beyond it. But if you're writing, sophisticated, operations, basically, that's when you start to do a little bit of research and you start to look at the documentation, just like you would for when you're learning Java and you're learning what all the different parameters are that you can throw at something, what they mean, what order they should be in, how they should be put together syntax-wise. And that helps. So I am not going to run the command that says article.delete all published at. Well, actually I could probably run that one now that I think about it, because I probably won't run into an issue. And notice where here I'm actually saying I can pick a field, published at, and notice the less than sign, and then put in a date. And I think I'm pretty safe in thinking that I probably don't have anything that I published before 2011 on January 1st. And notice the single quote and the double quotes here. Wrong number of arguments. What did I do wrong? I'm not quite sure. Article.delete all. Published at. I got a less than. I got single quotes. It doesn't look wrong to me. I'm not really sure what happened there. But then again, I really didn't want to delete everything, so I'm okay with it not working. All right. All right, now we're going to start turning our attention back to the models again, and we're going to start learning about another little component that we get kind of introduced into the MVC model. And that is a thing that's called a helper. And this is kind of a slight introduction to it. And he's got a little blurb here somewhere. Okay, so you may have noticed in your general scaffolding that you use the helper method called errors, full messages, to print out error messages. It isn't black magic, it's just code. All right? And so they have a routine written somewhere that, as a helper would sound, it's a little piece of code that allows you to do little extra things without having to burden your main code with it. And so they're kind of part of this MVC triangle, but they're kind of a little addendum is the way I like to think of them. All right. One of the things that he's really trying to show you here about helpers is that there is this one called errors that basically detects to see if we have any issues going on. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to create article.new, and notice that we're creating a new one and we're storing that blank version in that variable And of course, everything comes back nil because we didn't assign any attributes, right? And then we're just going to type article dot errors dot any question mark. Isn't that clever? And hopefully we get false. I mean, granted, it doesn't have any data in it, but there's nothing wrong with it. Now, if I try to save it, that's the next step. Will it save? Notice it did spit back false, but look at the SQL things. It says begin transaction, rollback transaction. And a rollback transaction means we didn't do it because there's nothing right. Now, just for curiosities, to make a point here is I have a student here that's running a Mac, and he did this last action, and he got a true. So he actually managed to save it. So
I got true too.
okay, so I got two people who got trues. And you guys didn't like set a title or anything like that? That's interesting. I would be interested to look at what your SQL Lite database looks like, because mine does not have a record in there. Do your databases have a blank row?
Has an ID of 7, and then title is only null, and then how many have it created and updated.
Okay. Yeah, created and updated at, those are automatically generated, and the ID is automatically generated. So I'm really curious, do you maybe have a different version of the SQLite database or a different version? It's kind of a curious difference. You know, so the one thing I would look at for a problem, and I'm not even calling it a problem, is I would actually launch a regular command prompt and then just do this. Look at your Ruby version, look at your Rails version, look at your SQLite. I think that one you have to do this. And I'm just curious, do you have different versions of these? You know, and once again, I'm not really concerned about it. There's something that triggered it to happen that didn't trigger it on mine.
I have 3.20.1 SQLite.
So you have a slightly newer version of SQLite. Is that true for you, Christian, as well?
The SQLite, version 3.20.
All right, so maybe that's a difference in the database. So you guys have a slightly newer upgrade, and maybe that allows for that. You know, I really have no other explanation aside from that. All right. All right, let me pull up my book here. John? All right, so we tried the article.errors.any, and then, you know, if you're curious, you could try this command, the articles.errors.full messages, which if you happen to have errors, it says title can't be blank and body can't be blank, because why does it trigger those? Because remember when we set up those validation things? Yeah, that's why. So what they're showing you here is you do have a way to check against the model that you're working with to see if there's any validation that you're missing. The other one that they have next here is another approach to retrieve these. So this time they're checking the title. What error messages? I'm not really sure what I did wrong here. Did I type anything wrong? I didn't see they typed anything wrong. It just looks like it's wrong number of arguments given 1, expected 0.
The same message.
Yeah, interesting. So, I mean, what that tells me is I should do this. So, my expectation there is that's a change in the language. So apparently some of the syntax has changed. And then they have another one for non-existent. That's kind of weird. Let's try that. Yeah, and that doesn't like that one at all. So we have some differences in what we're doing here. I'm not really concerned about it because really what we're doing is we're playing with the error messaging system and seeing how that works. And we are right at the tail end. And it looks like things are just working kind of strange at my prompt right now. So John, does this look familiar? You were stuck like this before, right?
Yeah.
And how did you get out?
Yeah.
Did it work? No, it's still going. And I think that you were missing...
I was missing the close ones.
Yeah, you were. Now, the very fortunate thing here is we're at the tail end of the chapter, so we really don't have much left to do. So I'm going to see if I can exit out. I just typed an exit. Now, that's not very eloquent. Now, what happens when you do exit the prompt like that, you guys need to be aware of this, that any things that I had existing in memory as temporary variables that weren't written to the database, they are now gone. Right. Now, a lot of the work that we're doing here really is to demonstrate the capabilities of Active Record. It would be rare that you would probably be working directly with the prompt unless you're trying to do specific tasks, like manipulate the database directly. But you see that you can use visual tools to do that as well. All right, folks, that's the end of this chapter. We're halfway through class here. We're going to take a break and then move into Chapter 6. And then we will be versioning our work. So we're going to call this Chapter 5 complete. Hopefully you guys are good about taking your screenshots and all that. I do also want to give you one other little tip that you guys might find helpful with working with a command prompt, and this is one you want to pay attention to, is if you come up to your command prompt window here, and I'm pulling it off the side, and you click on, right click on this little icon in the top left corner, and then choose, properties. One thing that you're going to notice in here is there on the options page, there is the capability of increasing the buffer size. Now what the buffer size indicates is the number of lines that you can scroll back through after you type them. So for example, right now if I close this and just scroll up, I'm going to get a maximum of 200 lines. Fortunately, that was enough to cover everything that I did. All right? But if I have like a longer session, I can actually up this. And I don't know what the maximum is, but you might want to consider like 500 or something a little bit larger. You can also up the number of buffers so that you have multiple command prompt windows all storing things. And the reason I bring this up is because then you can come in here and you can actually copy and paste all this stuff in. If you don't want to do screenshots, another option is to copy the stuff from the prompt and paste it into a document. And people that work with console applications a lot, sometimes as a fail-safe so that they have a peace of mind, sometimes they'll take whatever they do at the prompt and they write it directly to files, to log files. In fact, that's how most log files are created. Or they just leave it up so they can scroll back further than they did. They can maybe go back through a whole day's work and see where maybe they typed that one wrong character that messed everything up. So just a helpful little thing to know. And that ends Chapter 5. See you in Chapter 6.